In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, family, and welcome to another powerful episode of America in Black and White, where we honor truth, elevate voices, and illuminate the stories shaping our communities. Tonight, we gather in a moment of reflection and responsibility, a moment where mental health, education, and community empowerment intersect with the legacy of Black resilience. In a world that often asks us to shrink, tonight's guest is a reminder that healing is not only possible, but revolutionary. He is a visionary who understands that the mind is a battlefield, the community is a classroom, and wellness is a birthright. His work stands at the crossroads of therapy, creativity, advocacy, and purpose. Tonight, we welcome a man who has dedicated his life to helping others rewrite their story, reclaim their power, and rediscover their light. A man who believes and teaches that no matter how heavy the storm, how heavy the storm, the sun will come out tomorrow. This is not just an interview. This is a movement. This is a moment. This is America in Black and White, and I'd like to introduce you all to Professor C. Hello,
Hello,
sir.
how are you?
I'm just excellent. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Before we get into the show, is there anything you'd like to say to our audience?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here to talk about empowerment, to talk about connection, to talk about healing, to talk about art, which all of those things pretty much encompass my work, the way I choose to live each and every day, the way I choose to show up for the community that continues to show up for me. So thank you.
Yes, sir. And so first, I want to get into to the beginning here, where I'd like for people to get the opportunity to learn a whole lot more about you, learn your life story.
Okay.
Um, can you tell us who was Alan Michael before the world came to know you as Professor C?
Oh yeah. So I would say that life has definitely been tipsy turvy for me. But our paths are never linear. It sprouts depending on circumstances. And what I would say is that I was born in the South. I am from Faraday, Louisiana. I come from a family of healthcare workers. So being a country bumpkin up till about 10 years old, and then finally venturing up to Massachusetts, where I got the bulk of my education. But before all of that, growing up in a small town in Faraday, Louisiana, where we had probably one kindergarten, one elementary school, one middle school, one high school. So in those types of towns, everyone knows everybody, and your family is known by reputation because of your last name. Well, you're of this family, you're that family. So those things are, in some regard, predetermined for you, unfortunately. Um, but what I would say is that a small town offers a greater sense of community. Smaller towns like that definitely recognize adversity. It recognizes where there might be a lack of resources, especially can recognize deficits in education. So, kind of coming from that, and then my family transitioning to Massachusetts, it was like night and day in terms of the educational system. But that's an intricate part of my work that I recognize that in certain demographics that the education is not the same So that hopefully that's something we can get into as we can continue to talk. But aside from that, growing up from a small town, I would say that my family has always been rooted in faith. Growing up Pentecostal and Baptist in some regard, that we spend a great deal of our time in church. We spend a great deal of our time, my family, helping others in the community. My grandmother, God rest her soul, my mother's mother, Mary Lee Chest, who had passed away, was definitely a pillar in the church community. So through her work and us being involved, I got into singing. My mother pushing me to do other artistic endeavors like writing and dancing. I would say that by age 7 is when I wrote my first poem called "Why." It was a poem rooted in recognizing how a young child comes to recognize death and recognize violence in our communities and recognize how families can sometimes go through adversity, but it's not often talked about in our communities. 7 years old when I wrote that poem. It actually won a national poetry contest at the time. And from 7 on, poetry, singing, dancing, piano. My mother paid for me to get my first studio time, and I was probably 13, 14 years old. I recorded my first demo of 3 songs. From there, going on to meet producers and write music from age 13 to 21, being in record labels, local record labels in different cities that I was living in at the time. So the arts have always been a part of my journey. It has been the way that I have connected with others. It has been the way that I have always tried to tell my story, because what I believe is that no one can tell my story for me. I'm going to be the one to tell you my story my way. And I do just that with everything that I do. I do it from my heart. I do it with purpose, and I do it with the understanding that hopefully the message that I'm putting out into the world will reach someone and empower them to find their voice and maybe have their own stories being told in their way as well.
So tell us, what early experiences shaped your passion for mental health and human behavior?
Oh yeah, great question. So again, coming from parents that were in healthcare, on the maternal side and paternal side of my family, actually, I come from a family of CNAs, medical assistants, registered nurses. Um, my family, on all sides, I would say, have always been about community. Have always been about empowerment. Have always been about helping others, because what I recognize is that I know what it's like to go without. And that's a humbling experience to recognize that sometimes that you have to go without because of circumstances. There were times in Louisiana where um, we had um, we had something happen with our water system down there, and we weren't able to have clean water for a significant amount of time down there. But seeing again how the community shows up for each other in times of need empowers me to continue to do just that. Um, I am humbled by my ability to be able to share in these experiences, but say that those experiences don't define who I am, but they certainly shape how I choose to show up for others who go through similar situations. I think in our country, I think that people often make prejudgments about who you are based on what you look like, based on how you walk, how you talk. I have this saying that even your hair follicles can rub somebody the wrong way. Luckily, I don't have them on the top of my head anymore. But I say that to say that um, people will judge you. People will try to tell you what your intent is. And I believe that kind of knowing that it doesn't matter how good of a person you are, that you're always going to have those that try to put you in a box. And that oftentimes people that come from where I come from don't have a voice often. We're not asked to raise our hand, or if we do raise our hand, no one wants to hear what we have to say. So I've decided that I'm going to kick that door down and tell you what I have to say anyway, because no one's going to silence me, and I hope that others who are looking for healing and empowerment kind of come from that same lens that by helping yourself to be a better person, you are inspiring others to do just that. I believe that you have to save yourself before you save the world. And just who am I to tell someone else what they can do to be better if I'm not also walking in that truth? So that I would say pretty much grounds me, and it pretty much sums up the messages that I've gotten from family members over the years as well. That we welcome adversity because we recognize that growth is built in discomfort. It's those places that people don't want to go. It's those shadows, those places where people keep their head down that you need to really face. That's going to get you to that next step. But you have to be willing to get there. You have to be willing to go there, ultimately to grow.
You know, what I love about that response to that question is because I agree with you when you're absolutely right about, people and their vision. And just as I think about that, as you were explaining that, can you tell us what part of the small town living helped you to transition to this part as to dealing with mental health and human behavior?
Oh Jesus. Well, I would say that bigger cities. So if you transition from a small town to a larger demographic, what you notice is that the issues are bigger because the spaces are bigger. There's more room to run around. There's more places to get your toes wet and let your hair down. That you know, um, it's just more to it. There's more spaces to navigate. And coming from being like a small town country bumpkin, I'm gonna call it, and then transition to a city boy. My grandmother used to call it city slicker. That that you learn that there's so much that you don't know. That the smaller towns, you're really kind of cut off from some of the larger issues happening in the world, and the issues that you do have, you don't realize that they're bigger than your town because your existence is that town. So then transitioning from like a Faraday, Louisiana, for example, to a Springfield, Massachusetts, it's like wow, it's like night and day because Springfield, Massachusetts is a huge city, obviously urban city, and it's a metropolitan city. I would say that it exposed me to people from different walks of life, kind of doing that transition. Um, People having different belief systems, people not looking like me, because in a small town you do see a lot more people that look just like you. I think that was great to be able to transition into a bigger demographic in that way. But again, kind of getting back to the education and the languages and all these things, that it was like, wow, there's just so much more. There's so much more to life. There's so much more to learn. There's so much more to know. And sometimes I feel that when folks make these type of transitions, you can get lost in it. You can forget who you are. You can forget that you have a story too, and that you also matter. And maybe people might be interested in what you have to say. And I think that navigating that for me, for a significant amount of time, um, was quite the journey. I'd say I'm very outspoken now, but there have been times when I've questioned what I've had to say, and I've wondered, if is that going to sound right? Is someone going to think I sound silly? But what I've realized is that me coming from a family that is rooted in empowering others, that my voice does matter because, again, I know what it's like to go through adversity. I know what it's like to struggle. um, I've had sleepless nights. I've had crying days. I've had days when I've needed a hug. So kind of navigating how to kind of merge your identity into larger demographic, making sure that you can connect with other people, but still recognize that you have to continue to show up for yourself each and every day is very, very important. I feel, especially as you travel to different places and talk to people from different walks of life, what connects us all is that we're human. We all bleed red. We all bleed red. We all get hungry. We all certainly use the bathroom. So, what's the difference between me and someone else? Um, is that our differences live in our stories. It lives in the ways that we choose to again show up for ourselves and for other people. City life, city life is not for the weak. I would say that, especially if you're in New York. New York, bless them. But it definitely gives me high anxiety being in a fast-paced town like that. But I do love traveling to different places and speaking to people in different communities and kind of using my gifts to empower. Everything I do is rooted in empowering others because why else would I do it if it was not to inspire someone else to do just that, empower themselves, and then to empower someone else in their community.
Wow. So, growing up in Western Massachusetts,
Hmm.
what community influences molded your worldview?
Okay, that's a great question. My mother, I would say my mom definitely was strict on me, but for a good reason. I think she knew in her heart, in her mind, in her spirit and soul that my purpose would be bigger and greater than I could even imagine. My mother was always one to push her kids to go for our goals, to go for our dreams. She believed that you only get one life. She still believes that to this day, but that you only get one life and you have to live it to the fullest, and that um, our mistakes don't define who we become, but they certainly play a part in shaping who we become. And from that lens, I feel like I've always kind of surrounded myself with like-minded individuals. So I've had to shout out Western Massachusetts. I We were back and forth from down south in Massachusetts for years. So from Louisiana to Springfield, Mass, and then we lived in Florida for a period of time during Hurricane Katrina. That's another story. That I've always kind of surrounded myself with people who were artistic in nature, or in some way had some type of role where there was helping involved, or there was a message or a story or some way to kind of impact others. So Miss Dr. Paula Moore, I'm going to shout her out. Dr. Paula Moore, Springfield, Mass, has this. She has this company that she has called the Y Set Academy. That I'm so honored to say that I was a part of from a very very young age. Me and some other like-minded students from the High School of Commerce in Springfield would leave school and go to the White Set Academy. And what they did there, they had music production, they had resume prep, they had other artistic things you can do. They were pretty much preparing us for excellence. That they was teaching us and shaping us that the learning starts young, and you keep to build it up as you go into adulthood. So being having to be a part of that program with Dr. Paula Moore, I think was awesome. We also had another good brother of mine at the time, Mr. AJ Bayman, who was the head of music production there through YSET at that time. So he was definitely instrumental in shaping, my love for music and helping me kind of fine tune my artistic sound, I would say, in singing. He would always say, "Oh man," he goes, "Those harmonies, you got sound like D'Angelo." God rest his soul. But again, so having those experiences through that. Also, when I was not in a like after school program where there was arts and empowerment through that, I was recording music from like 13 to 2021. I was recording music with multiple labels, local labels in Springfield at the time. I've had plenty of producers that I worked with. This one producer name was Trix Cardell McManus. Call him out, that I worked with back in the day. He was very instrumental in my musical journey from age 13 to about 20, 21 years old as well. Um, so yeah, those would be like the major ones before college. Before college, I know you and I spoke a little bit about my journey when I went into college. We can talk about that too whenever you're ready. But that was before I ended up going into higher education.
So, what was the moment you realized you were called to help others heal?
Um, I think I think I realized that I was called to help others heal I would say maybe around 17, 18, when I decided that I didn't want to go to college. I said no, I'm not gonna go to college. At the time I was watching Romeo Must Die with Jet Li and Aaliyah, and I said, she's working in a CD store. I said, I want to work in a CD store in Atlanta by day, and then I want to record music by night, and I'm gonna get signed. I'm not going to college. I'm not doing that. I said, I don't want to do that. So, excuse me. I didn't. I didn't apply for college right away. I had no intent on going at all. I had no interest. I was not interested whatsoever. People were talking about it. I'm like, good luck, you do that. But what resonated with me was that someone had said something very profound, and they said, Alan Michael, you know, I know that you like this music thing and you want to sing and you want to work in a little CD store in Atlanta, but what if something happens? What if you can't work in that CD store in Atlanta? What if you don't have your voice anymore? What do you have to fall back on? And I said, I guess you got a point. I'll see what college has to offer. And I excuse me, I ended up meeting Joan Fuller. She was the director of what's called at the time the Urban Education Program of Westfield State University. That program was dedicated to identifying students from rural areas, students who maybe have lacked resources or not a lot of resources, um, maybe not empowered, feeling disadvantaged, and telling them that we want to empower you. We want to give you a chance to show others that you can exude excellence. I say exude excellence. That program was rooted in. I always felt like a recruit. Like I felt like if you had to look at academics, that John Fuller would be like this secret agent director, and she's recruiting these students, and she's gonna help you become the best student you can be. And because that's the kind of energy that Joan gave. She had a motherly aura to her. You had no choice but to warm up in your soul being around this woman. She looked at you with intent. She would console you with purpose, and every step she took was rooted in a mission to empower someone. Like just kind of being around someone that powerful, you had no choice but to say, you know what, I want that for me, because this woman made you feel like she would look you in your soul and make you feel like she had known you your entire life. And pretty much what parents would say to their children, that I know that you are destined for great things. And once you begin believing that, the rest of the world will also. So going through that program, I think definitely put me through the ringer. I'll say that. It was not easy. It was a academic boot camp for students of color and students from urban areas. 6-week program that you have to complete to matriculate into the major campus there. It was intense. We had a schedule. The deadlines to get to each class were pretty firm. Um, they expected nothing but the best out of us. They expected excellence at every wake of the day. That they were going to challenge us. That they were going to push us to be the greatest versions of ourselves. That has, I would say, that goes down as probably the most rewarding experience in my life, because without that, what we talk about later in this interview wouldn't be possible if I had not gone through such a profound, impactful, and powerful experience rooted in connection, and making us realize that we had more potential than a lot of us actually believed we had. Something that stands out with me through that process is that we had to attend this class called critical thinking. It was a requirement. A requirement to pass the program was that you had to pass critical thinking. Now, this class and philosophy, we had to also take philosophy. So these classes were rooted in challenging the way we saw the world. And if we did see the world a specific way, it was like, well, then what are you going to do about it? You see the world this way. What's your purpose in making it different? if you don't like the way that it is right now? What can you do? So kind of having that, kind of being challenged in that way to say that we see that this is something that that gets you upset, that grinds your gears. But what are you going to do to empower yourself to take the next step to say that I'm not going to tolerate that, and I'm going to shift the narrative that someone else told me had to be the narrative at the time, and I actually believed it. So having all of these messages kind of come to us, it really strengthened that community that of students up through the urban education program. It's now called the Lead Scholars Program through Westwood State University. There's been a few directors since Joan Fuller. Azanda Seymour, I'd like to call her out, Azanda Seymour, who was the urban ed director after Joan. And then we have LaToya Wilson, who is now the acting director for the Westwood State University Lead Scholars Program. That opportunity, though, to be able to do that, if I could go back and do it again, I would do it 6 times over. I feel that that program really put me in a place to where I became really, really loyal to a cause. I saw the impact it was making on students, and I gave my time to that program every single summer leading up until the time that I graduated from that university.
Wow. So can you tell us, like, innately, with your
Hmm.
superpower being to help people to heal and
Hmm.
to help them with the mental health, can you tell us, again, in connecting the experiences from your small town living to
Yeah.
going on to the city, how has that enhanced you personally as you deal with the people that you come across in your daily living?
Great question. Great question. Well, what I will say is this: Professor C believes that coming from such a small town environment, um, really, and then kind of seeing like what urban education did for students from urban areas, that it made me feel more empowered. It made me feel like I was seen, like I was heard, like I mattered, like my story could help others. Not only was I was rooted in connecting with other students, not only that had a story like mine, but from other walks of life as well. But that it helped me to realize that um, our stories don't have to be in competition here. I don't have to be. It doesn't have to be. Woe is me. That it doesn't have to be poor me. I don't want you to feel sorry for me ever. But I do want you to recognize that I do see the strength in adversity, and but I can also recognize someone else's story too. Even if it's a different story, um, we can still be rooted in similar causes. It's not people who are leaders don't often have the same exact story, um, but they recognize the strength. They recognize what the obstacles were. They recognize what the challenges were and how one would work to overcome them. I feel that kind of coming from a small town and then coming to a bigger city also made me recognize my humanity. It made me recognize again where things were maybe lacking there. But what a wise supervisor once told me is that one can only make their best decision with the information that's in front of them. Even if it's, you can only make your best judgment with the information that you have. Sometimes you don't always have all the pieces to the story. So that's where assumptions come from. People assume things based on little bits of information. But I believe that you have to do the work to dig deeper than that. I don't want you just to make assumptions. I want you to grab a microscope and say, well, what else is going on here? What's being said? But what does that mean underneath that? What does that behavior communicate? I'm seeing one thing, but there's something else that could be going on here as well. I believe that we all have to do our due diligence to we have to do our homework. That we can't allow people to tell us one thing or another without really doing our putting in the time and work and effort, investing and really fully trying to understand something, understand someone. So kind of having the urban education program do just that, I feel was empowering. I felt like we were fighting against, at the time, and still to this day, fighting against stereotypes, fighting against what people believed that we were capable of. I've had supervisors that I've worked with in the past that don't look like me, that say someone like me isn't supposed to exist. So if you tell me that I'm a unicorn or that I'm pretty much a flying pig, how am I supposed to take that? How am I supposed to respond to that? So that's why I believe coming from these small spaces and then coming to bigger places, you get to kind of talk about these experiences that are rooted sometimes in what I like to call, as you know it, microaggressions. Microaggressions. It's I don't think that it's always I don't think it's always intentional, though. I'll say that. I think that people have their own biases based on what they've been exposed to and what the media tells you to love, be afraid of, to appreciate, to invest time in. I think that all these things are rooted in influence through media, through um, through your background and things that you've kind of gone through that has kind of shaped your worldview. But these spaces, I believe, are designed to challenge your way of thinking, not to discredit you, but to empower you to see things from a different perspective.
Wow. You know, there was so much wrapped up into that, and I appreciate how detailed you are with these questions, because I think that along the way, and just listening to what you just mentioned, I'm sure that there are several people that's out in the audience that actually have gone to several cities, being from a small town, and going to some of these large metropolitan areas, and basically getting like, wow, you know.
Hmm.
And so that experience that caused them to be adjusting, some people don't adjust well, because, it's like sometimes they get overwhelmed, because it's kind of like, where do I fit in?
Hmm.
But it seems like you didn't have that issue, because you had a solid foundation around you. Is that safe to say?
Absolutely, it is absolutely is safe to say. I believe that I'm rooted in spirituality. I do believe in the Most High. I believe that my life has purpose um, beyond just me being here and being human and enjoying my life. That my life is meant to reach others through the stories that I can tell, through the education that I can provide. A foundation is important. They say that stand for nothing or fall for anything. I think that even the greatest of leaders may have struggles at times. You have to be very discerning into the type of people that you have in your space, in your energy, in your circles, for sure. I think that's really, really important, especially as I continue to grow in being an entrepreneur and now being on my own business wise, that I recognize that everybody don't want to see me win. And that's okay. That's okay if you don't, but I'm still going to root for you, even if you don't root for me,
Oh,
because,
amen.
you know, um,
Amen.
that's okay, and I think that that's what leaders need to recognize, is that everybody isn't going to resonate with what you are trying to provide, and that is all right, because that is not what the goal should be. Even if I reach one person, mission accomplished, because I've made one person on this earth feel some way different than they felt before they came into contact with me. And it's those incremental steps that lead to bigger picture impact and change. That a good leader takes the time to see the bigger picture by building from the ground up and leaving no man behind. That if you see someone struggling, I'm going to say, I got you. But if you see me struggling the next time, I hope you got me too. But if
Mhm.
you don't, I'm going to be okay regardless. Because what you don't do for me, I know that the Most High will.
So let me ask this one last question before I move on, because
Hmm.
you just given us all this life right now. Can you tell me, How did your own life challenges prepare you for the work you do today?
Oh Lord goodness. Yes. I would say, life has not always been easy for me. I think that in my younger years, I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out where I fit in. You know that saying, oh, he has an old soul. Yeah, like the old grannies and aunties. He got an old soul. Y'all hear this. It's like as a kid, you're like, well, what does that mean? What does it mean that I have an old soul? But kind of thinking back to those times, um, I recognize that I was always a little bit ahead of my time, just in the way that I thought. I just didn't really relate at the time to some of the kids that were the same age as me. I always gravitated towards older friends in some regard. But I recognize that in Black and Brown communities, there is a of stigma of therapy. It rightfully so, rightfully so. So I want to explain. I want to preface this by saying that I recognize why. So coming from a small town, I would say in not all Black communities. I don't want to lump all Black communities or brown communities in the same under the same scope. What I would say is the way that I was brought up is that typically the way that trauma is dealt with is that we try to find ways to get over it. It's not something that you spend a lot of time talking about. Um, trauma, trauma, it's complex in that way, especially in our communities. But at the time, if you think back to the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, that not many therapists would look like me. So why would you feel comfortable talking about what's going on in your household? Even in schools, you didn't have a lot of Black teachers like that. You probably had one, um, that one teacher, but not really feeling like you had a space to kind of talk about trauma, or having support with trauma, because we really didn't have a lot of names. No one talked about like diagnosis and stuff back then either. No one wanted to meet with a therapist, because you met with a therapist, everyone was going to assume that you have significant mental health, that you were crazy, things like that. I hate saying words like that, but I just got to call it what it is. That's what was said at the time. So I think that these types of topics at the time were very delicate, and I believe that people of color had a hard time navigating how to talk about adversity, and then defining trauma too. That's a whole nother thing. Everyone always assumes that trauma is something that is a horror story. And I get it. Like that significant trauma can be, but there can be other traumatic experiences. The loss of a loved one can be traumatic. Um, Getting to a car accident can be traumatic. I think for me that it was hard to kind of navigate those experiences, but knowing that I wanted to navigate those experiences, and knowing that in my family we have had loss that prompted me to go into the mental health field after my Westfield State days. Becoming a therapist was rooted in family loss, having a family member take their life, someone that was close to me. But again, it just makes you wonder how much was he holding on to before that horrible act happened. But this is the type of things I believe that people of color, everyone essentially, but in our communities, we're dealing with. I wrote a research paper in my grad program at Cambridge College on the stigma of therapy in Black and Brown communities. And what I would say about that paper, which makes it impactful, is that I talk about misdiagnosis in Black communities, that culture is not always accounted for when someone of color is being diagnosed. So that if one is spiritual, for example, could be misdiagnosed for schizophrenia or something else because you believe in spirits. So these things have to be taken into account. Someone's cultural identity. Um, I believe that there's a lack of resources that leads to people of color not wanting to be involved in therapy. I believe there's a mistrust. Um, the competency is a challenge. I believe that it's important to have people that are Black and brown in these spaces to really shape how diagnosis is defined moving forward, especially in the current climate of our country being the way that it is. We're living in unknowns. And I think we're getting up every day and just trying to put our best face on. You know, I'm smiling right now, but you know, there are uncertainties here that we need to talk about. You know, we can't keep not talking about it because it's only perpetuating what's been happening our entire existence, that we sweep things under a rug and we keep it pushing. But I'm fighting against that. I say no more pushing things under a rug. And we're going to say that these things are still impacting us. And as a matter of fact, they are impacting us more now than they've ever done before. But beyond what we've already done, what are we willing to do next? I believe is what my mission stems toward. What is next for us? How do we continue to empower? How do we continue to find our voices? And how do we continue to make an impact? One for all and all for one.
Wow. Now, with that, I want to transition over to the real meat and potatoes of what you do. Your work as
Mm-hmm.
a licensed mental health professional.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what inspired you to pursue licensure in mental health counseling?
Yeah. I've had some great supervisors over the years. When I left Westfield State, I graduated in May of 2011. I worked at the camp. I worked at Westfield State for about a year as the Eli campus manager, and then I transitioned to the Key program, Inc. I was with Key for 10 and a half, 11 years. The Key program, I got to shout them out too. I got to shout out the Key program. The Key program definitely, like Joan Fuller, like my mother, like my grandmother, saw something in me. I spend a lot of my time just second guessing myself. I think that if if I was a superhero, if Professor C is a superhero, I think that Professor C's kryptonite would be self doubt. That it would be me getting in my way, right? Not necessarily someone else, but that's that doubt, that imposter syndrome that we so talk about very often. That um, what do I have to who says that I can be the leader, but remembering the work that those staff members of faculty put into me and other students at Westfield State through the urban education program, I wanted to do the same. So getting into the Key program, which is a nonprofit organization rooted in supporting at risk youth in the group residential setting. So during that experience, I was able to work with group residents directly. We helped them with their routines. We ran informal groups for them. We tracked them at school. We pretty much gave them a predictable schedule, as predictable as it could be. Recognizing again a mistrust. A lot of these kids are coming in with a mistrust for adults, oftentimes. That there is a mistrust for authority figures. So they're just seeing you as another member. You're just another person here to tell me what to do, pretty much. So having them see something different often is a challenge. But I believe that any therapeutic relationship is rooted in the acronym RICH. RICH stands for respect, information, communication, and hope. That if you can embody all four of these concepts, that you can really empower these students, residents. I worked in schools too, to connect with you, to understand that you're meeting them where they're at. And that's what my purpose for getting licensed was, recognizing that sometimes you got to meet people where they're at, not to talk at them, but to talk to them, to recognize that sometimes therapy is not going to be on a couch with a notepad. Sometimes therapy is going to be me talking to you while you're dribbling a basketball. Or maybe therapy is going to be you sitting in the back seat and I'm picking you up from school. Recognizing that any moment in the day really can present for a therapeutic moment, because if you are really attuned to supporting these residents, these students, these kids, that you can really make any moment a teachable moment. But it starts with them recognizing that you are also human and you know what it's like to struggle. You know what it's like not to have. And what I realized going through the Key program, I became a by 6 months at the Key program, I was a shift supervisor. I then became an assistant program supervisor. By the age of 24, I was a program supervisor running my own group home with a group of teenage girls. I was 24 years old running this program at the time. And again, the Key program gave me many opportunities to lead being there. They saw something in me and it made me believe in myself. And I said, beyond just being like a group home director here, I want to do more than that. I want to really focus in on the mental health. I want to meet people sometimes, maybe before they get to these spaces, to see if there are preventative measures that we can take so that they're not ending up in a group home setting. I want to help to reunify children with their parents, which I spent a great deal of my time doing through the Key program, really working hard to get these kids back home to their moms and their dads. I believe that becoming a licensed therapist also supported me being able to um, educate other staff members on differences in culture, and having like having a Caucasian staff member, maybe teaching them how to support African American female, how she would like her hair done, things like that, things that were lacking, right? Having really good supervisors, though. I got to shout out Michael Murray, who was my supervisor from the Key program. He is now the chief operating officer of the Key program incorporated. That good sir right there. I gotta give him his due diligence and his credit. I salute you, Mike. I honor you for believing in me and putting me in these spaces. Mike was really instrumental in pushing me. He said, Alan, Michael, you've done a lot of great things for this agency. He goes, but if you want to continue to grow, you need to go back to school. I said, all right, Mike. So, kind of having those conversations and having people pushing me in that way. Other good leaders from the Key program, Dr. Jeffrey Gold, Lynn Nelson, um, Michael Guthrie, people like that.
So, can you tell us how you approach therapy differently from traditional models?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. So, how do you approach therapy differently from traditional models?
I did not hear that question. I guess it's static or something on this.
Okay.
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
yes, I can.
Okay. How do you approach therapy differently from traditional models?
Okay, yes. So, what I would say is that I believe what I do in my practice is rooted in not only mental health, but it's also rooted in art. So, expressive art therapy, I would say, I definitely encompass cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, expressive art therapy, solution focused therapy. Let's say motivational interviewing, even all of these things combined, right? Those things combined, considering that adversity continues to be a concern in our communities, and my love for music, singing, dance, art, that all those things come together to make up what my practices are. Every single one of them, everything that I do in my practices are rooted in combining these elements. With that being said, I don't, and I don't suggest that my clients do one thing or the other. I'm rooted in meeting them where they're at, with them having an understanding of the work that I do, and we come together to form that therapeutic alliance and figure out what their treatment plan is going to look like. I am a therapist who is rooted in honoring clients' individuality. I honor individuality. I support personal growth and gains, and I believe that a treatment plan should sound like it's representing the client's voice their authenticity and totality. Yeah, we have to use some formalities with the type of treatment modalities, but we make sure that we encompass the client's voice into the treatment planning and into the session when I'm actually taking the time to meet with them one-on-one.
Wow. So, so as you've been taking on your clients and you've now gone out into private practice, can you tell us what are some of the things that you've noticed from, your clients that come from the Black and Brown communities, and how I'm sure that there's like this thing where they're just not sure about this therapy thing and how this is going to work. What are some of the things that you've learned from those clients that you've been able to ease them more into the programs of treatment?
Absolutely. I spend a great deal of time preparing my clients before I even meet them. I feel like my process is very intricate in terms of me really working to establish some form of communication and relationship prior to the first session. So I do offer, obviously, I do at least, I offer times where I'm willing to kind of meet with the client before we actually do a comprehensive intake to kind of hear their voice of what they believe is going on, and giving them a chance to understand who I am beyond what a profile might say about me or a resume. That I want them to see the person that I am beyond that, because I'm more than just a therapist. I'm a human. I'm also a man, a black man. I have other identities that all come together to make me who I am in totality. So just like I'm able to recognize that, I think it's important that my clients know that I recognize that in them as well, and that I would never ever put them in a box or assume one thing. I assume nothing about my clients ever. I never assume anything. I always ask questions to get an understanding of who they are. And what I hear from my clients is that they appreciate that. They appreciate that I don't come in. I call it assuming identity. I don't assume identity. That's not what I'm about. So I believe kind of having someone really meeting them at a human level before a therapist client level is really, really important for establishing a good foundation for a therapeutic relationship. I'm meeting you as a human first, but then beyond that, then we can talk about what a therapist and a client looks like.
So, what are the 7 areas of wellness, and how do you integrate them into your work?
Okay, I always gotta write them down when I say them, so I'm gonna write them I'm gonna write them as I mention them and kind of give you my explanation of all of them. Okay. All right. So the 7 areas of wellness that I like to look at. There's like different wheels. I think if one was to go and type in 7 areas of wellness or 7 domains of wellness on like a Google, for example, or Yahoo, you'll see that the 7 areas of wellness are different pillars in your life functioning. That is believed by me and anyone who teaches or educates about the 7 areas of wellness, that if you have a foundation in each of these areas, that you can reach satisfactory in life, that you are doing your due diligence to get to a point of ongoing happiness. So, spiritual, spiritual functioning being one is very, very important. Um, I do ask about spirituality. I don't assume that one is religious, though, ever. I simply ask if my clients are spiritual, and then have them describe what spirituality or religion means to them. And any question I ask my clients, it's usually rooted in that way. What does it mean for you? Environmental would be another area. So what I like to tell my clients is that with environmental, it's all about in what ways are you supporting environments that you belong to. It's beyond just having a neat home environment, for example, being an environment. How are you showing up for the communities that you belong to? Um,
what are you doing to give back? You know, are you volunteering at pantries? Are you what else would be something? Are you helping out with no littering? Like, are you picking up things that you see on the ground, for example? How are you caring about your environment and environments that you belong to? How are you supporting or empowering others to do just that? Um, Social functioning is another area that becomes important to talk about for clients. That is rooted in your relationships. I would say it's your relationship with yourself, but also your relationship with others, because you have to continue to work on yourself to be able to maintain self-respect, to manage conflict appropriately, to navigate the complexities of when to walk away from toxic people and toxic relationships. That's really rooted in your social functioning, but you really have to have a good relationship with yourself. So I really teach my clients how to get back to themselves. That I really, really want you to fall in love with yourself, because I also believe that you teach others how to treat you by how you treat you. That if you're treating yourself with respect, that you're walking in your purpose, that you are going day by day proud and standing in your truth and what you can offer this world, that other people will have no choice but to follow suit. They will have no choice but to follow suit. Intellectual functioning is important as well. So again, that's the ability to kind of learn new topics, new concepts in the academic settings, how you apply some of those critical thinking skills to real life situations. For example, physical functioning, what kind of speaks for itself. Are you taking care of your body? Are you practicing wellness? Are you have clean eating? They call it. Are you eating healthy foods? Are you cutting out some of the junk food, for example? In what ways are you taking care of your body? Are you active? Are you exercising? Um, Emotional functioning. So this one's really, really big, obviously, in the therapy practice, that we want to know where our clients are and how they're thriving in their emotional functioning, or where there might be deficits. There might be some challenges. And then finally, occupational functioning. So your ability to sustain, like I would say, productivity in work settings. If you are engaged in any kind of trades, if you are trying to obtain any types of licenses, things like that. Things that add to your professional growth and value, so to speak. So I believe that real happiness is rooted in making progress in all 7 of those areas. I typically would rate my clients on a scale of 1 to 10 in how they see their functioning. So I say, on a scale of 1 to 10, are you thriving? Or you feel like you've made the most progress you can make in this area? Or 1, you think that you haven't made any progress at all, or this is an area that you hope to continue to explore further. I always utilize the sandwich effect with my clients. The sandwich effect is rooted in starting with a positive, which is that first slice of bread, and then ending with a positive, that bottom piece of bread. The meat in the middle is what I believe we choose to work on for the benefit of gain. So any rating scale that I use for the 7 areas of wellness is rooted in helping my clients recognize that it's not that this is like a negative, so to speak. This is an area that might be more challenging for you. I believe language matters. And what you speak with your tongue becomes reality. So we really have to be careful with how the words we use, the language we speak, the sentences that we use, that we need to take the time and really reframe language as much as possible, so that we can look at things from a different perspective.
So let me, of those 7, let's
Mm-hmm.
go back to number 4, because number 4 stands out as something that's like is so relevant that it's like a catch-all, where pretty much everything you do in life is based
Mm-hmm.
on that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us, how do you emphasize that in your treatments with your clients, or part of your therapeutic sessions?